Prior to the outbreak of smallpox, the Inca civilization was thriving, in large part due to the ruler Huayna Capac. When he assumed control in 1493, the empire was already enormous. It stretched from Argentina all the way up to Colombia, encompassing about half of South America. Huayna Capac visited each province to meet with the governors. He oversaw repairs of infrastructure like irrigation systems and encouraged the planting of new crops like peanuts and cotton. During this time, he commanded over 55,000 troops and waged several victorious campaigns. Drawings from the period depict him being carried into battle covered in jewels. The Great Palace was built as his hunting lodge, a kind of 16th century South American palace, and there he partied with his favorite subjects and generals. Meanwhile, his wife amused herself tending to a flock of doves. It was a good time to be an Incan, but that was before smallpox began to afflict the empire. Huayna Capac died of the disease in 1527. So did all of his favorite generals and most of his family. Supposedly, on his deathbed, he named his infant son as his heir, but by the time he did so, the baby had died as well. He is said to have spoken, "My father the sun is calling me. I shall go to rest by his side," which are very poetic last words. Unfortunately, better last words would have been a definitive statement over the order of succession. People couldn't decide whether he would have rather seen the country ruled by the next in line, Huascar, or his favorite son, Atahualpa. Obviously, any confusion about who is going to rule is not desirable. It leads to civil wars. But dynastic squabbles were common among the Incas, and the people would have been happy with whoever emerged victorious in battle as their ruler. Huascar and Atahualpa assembled their armies, and a bitter civil war began to determine who would succeed Huayna Capac. Unfortunately, this war killed off many of their warriors, while more were falling victim to smallpox. The Incas were experiencing great numbers of fatalities on two fronts. It is believed that if Huayna Capac had lived, even with the plague afflicting the Incas, the Spaniards would never have triumphed. Pizarro himself admitted, "If he had been alive when we invaded Peru, we could not have won, for he was greatly loved by his people. We could neither have invaded nor triumphed, not even if over 1,000 Spanish troops had come at once." Once again, having a brilliant, beloved leader at the helm of a country when the land is in turmoil is one of the best situations people can hope for. That becomes apparent when that leader is dead. By the time Pizarro met and defeated Atahualpa's troops in 1532, they had been grievously weakened by war and disease. Smallpox also beset the other great American empire of the time, the Aztecs, who were settled in what is now Mexico. When a Spanish company, led by Hernan Cortes, arrived in 1519, they brought smallpox with them. With the benefit of hindsight, the Aztecs should have immediately sprung into battle against the Spaniards. Instead, when Cortes's forces arrived in the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec leader Montezuma II showered Cortes with gifts, including beautiful necklaces of precious jewels, gold, and feathers. This warm welcome wasn't extended because the Aztecs were as gentle and peaceful a people as the Incas. The Aztecs were, there is no way to get around this, generally described as bloodthirsty maniacs who practiced cannibalism and daily human sacrifice. Let us digress for a small gory moment to talk about human sacrifice. Aztecs weren't alone in this practice. The Incas sacrificed humans as well. They just went about it in a sort of civilized way. Children, often chosen for their beauty, who were raised to be eventual preteen and teenage sacrifices for the community, were given high social status. They dined on special foods like maize and members of the lower classes couldn't enjoy. Before they went to their deaths, they were given a great feast in their honor and a personal meeting with the emperor. One sacrifice supposedly claimed, "You can finish with me now because I could not be more honored than by the feast which they celebrated for me in Cusco." Afterward, they would be given drugs and alcohol and led up a mountain where they would be knocked on the back of the head and left to die of exposure. Their families would be considered honored people for their sacrifice. Aztecs, on the other hand, would tie people to rocks each day and rip out their still beating hearts, believing that this was necessary to keep the sun burning. They'd then kick the bodies down the temple stairs and, depending upon the source of information, allegedly eat the corpses. It was considered a good omen if the victims cried a lot at the time of sacrifice. To my fellow late risers, if every Aztec could have slept in until noon even one day, they would have realized the sun rose without requiring still beating hearts and countless lives would have been saved. Remember that the next time anyone criticizes your sleeping habits.